Welcome back to the Win With Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win With Dice team. Joining me is Ramon, and also we have a special guest on, Joel Happyhil, here to talk about the Dawn RPG. The Dawn RPG takes some inspiration from shonen anime and manga, and mixes it with grid-based tactical combat in a setting-agnostic system. In this episode, we get to talking about settings as well as other details with the game. Of course, if you want to check out the game for yourself, the Dawn RPG is linked below, along with Joel's Discord and Patreon. This is part 2 of the interview we started last week, so before you hop into this one, check out the previous episode, because we're just going to get right back into it. And of course, as always, if you want to hear more episodes like this where we talk to game designers, or if you're into games like the Lancer RPG, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Starfinder, Mutants and Masterminds, all sorts of fun games, then definitely stick around because we've got more stuff coming up. So if you're interested in anything more from us, please subscribe to the channel, either on YouTube or on Spotify. You can follow the podcast there as well, or other podcast platforms. But for now, we're going to get back into this interview with Joel and hear more about the Dawn RPG. So, you do say that in this game, like, it can be played in a different number of settings, especially, like, your own, like, homebrew worlds and stuff like that. But you did include a few examples of settings, so I did kind of want to touch on those, 'cause I did like the, world of Daggers and Dusk. I thought was pretty cool. But I kind of like the idea of, you know, not having a specific setting, but giving a baseline for a few different ones. So I was wondering, like, where that idea kind of came from. Like, why, instead of taking all these pages up with a single world and doing, like, a bunch of specific details on that, like, why do shorter pages on 3 different ones?
It's a combination of a few things. Part of my original goal was always to, like, make it setting agnostic, because I always felt like that, at least for me and my friends when we were first playing D&D, like, we didn't know what, like, Faerun was or whatever. We didn't know what the settings were. Like, that's a whole separate book you've got to buy, and, like, no one really, like, read it fully. There's always, like, one guy who read the book and other people who didn't. And it just always felt weird and disconnected to try to worry about the setting of the games we were playing. So we always had more fun, like, making up something and, like, having fun, like, working on something together. And that way we all have, like, investment in it, and it's like, something that we can all relate to and have different things we care about in that world. And I wanted other people playing the game to have that same experience. I'm not going to force people, obviously, but I put a lot of incentives to, like, hey, here's, like, a little thing for how you could make a world. Or, like, hey, you could do this, like, just so you know. If there's something you and your friends want to do, I think you'd have a lot of fun. You should make your own thing. But it was also 2 other practical reasons. Was, 1, I'm not a fiction writer. I don't consider myself an author. I am a game designer first. And that's mostly what I care about, and it's very hard for me to write fiction and lore and stuff for games. So not having to put a lot of, like, page space into that helps me a lot. I think I've gotten better since I've started, because I have had to write, like, for the settings, obviously, because those are the things I had to do. For the other reason of, I want characters and art in this book, and I want them to be from places that I know, so that I can make their designs make sense, and that I make them designs I like. So there had to be at least one setting that existed in the book so that I could, like, make the game cohesive and make the characters, like, feel more real in my mind.
Right.
So, like, yeah, like, all the art in the book pulls from those 3 settings and, like, expands on them and creates characters in those settings, and that's something I really appreciate about them.
Yeah, and, like, I like that the way that you kind of broke down the, like, you called the bare essentials of the setting. Where it's like, what the hell the magic is, where's the action at, and, like, you know, what's the unity like, right? Like, I think that's a good way of approaching it, even if somebody, like myself, I'm not so great at narrative stuff. I'm mostly just kind of like an in-the-moment, kind of off-the-cuff, whatever the players are up to, that's what I'm GMing kind of person. Yeah. So my settings typically are very, like, I would say, they're not very deep, right? They're like, things exist as they are required, right? So I kind of like the way that you've set it up, and it's easy enough that anybody who isn't good at it could probably just start here and work their way from it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you know, if they have the right guidance or the right start, they can definitely create something. Although I do have to say, you mentioning just wanting to play the game and not knowing the setting when it came to D&D is extremely relatable. Because I know I certainly went through the same thing with Pathfinder, because when I started playing in the early days with Ramon and our home group, we were always doing like our own homebrew thing. I don't think I didn't really make a ton of effort to learn the Pathfinder setting until like Starfinder came out, to be honest, and then by then it was like a whole different thing. I think, Ramon, you probably went through a different direction than me because you started playing some Pathfinder stuff earlier, but for me it was like, I don't know, I just wanted to do my own thing.
No, for the majority of my gaming, like in the hobby, it's been like homebrew stuff that like my friends have came up with or we've came up with, and I've only ran through like 2 adventure paths, and that's when like I started knowing like what the hell's going on in Galarian. But I think most people just make up their own world and run homebrews versus like going off of the Sword Coast and their stuff. Or actually lots of people just do that, but they just rip the map and then change everything about it, right? Like
especially for fantasy, like Western fantasy or European fantasy games, because like, you know, you all know like, oh yeah, the elves and the dwarves and stuff, like I've seen television. Like, it's not something that sticks out as like specific to the game, even though like some of it like actually is. But like with Starfinder, it's like, oh, they have like these weird unique aliens that you can't just like kind of, it's hard to like just make up what they're doing there. It makes more sense to like follow through with what they're doing. But for the fantasy games especially, I feel like people are just like, hey, yeah, I get it, I can do something off of this.
Yeah that was kind of my experience, in that it was like they gave specific like places that these aliens come from and things like that. It was a little harder to deviate, whereas with fantasy stuff, especially being very generic Western fantasy about it, I don't know, elf can come from wherever elves are from. Yeah, I don't know. So it depends on, sometimes it just depends on the day and when I'm thinking about it, but on the one hand, I do like when you have that setting to work with, because you have like a baseline for everybody, and you can fill in, like it fills in certain gaps for you as you create stories and stuff. But at the same time, I don't like feeling limited by it. Like, if I can't create a character in a game without also knowing the history of the setting or specifics about the setting, it does feel, I don't know, like restrictive in a way. Like, if I can't escape the specific setting when making a character, it can feel limiting.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. It's like, I try not to establish too much about the 3 settings if someone wants to use it, partly for that. Because I feel like the worst case, like, nightmare scenario for me in most games is, like, someone's running a game, and, like, one player is like, oh, my character does this, and it, like, makes sense based on, like, just, like, a basic understanding of the setting. And then another player is like, well, actually, that doesn't make sense because of this more weird niche fact that, like, is in the setting, which is, like, cool for that guy to, like, know of, and it's, like, a fun thing to learn about, but that is just a horrible situation for the person who's being corrected, because, like, what are you supposed to do now? Like, how are you supposed to, like, interact with the game if when you don't have the context and you feel like now that you can do it wrong? So, anything that isn't happening right now in the settings, I try to keep very vague and, like, let people fill in the blanks. And it's just sort of like, it's more so like an aesthetic thing of, like, what is the things called? What is the fucking, what do you guys look like? What is the setting like, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's like what are the, who could be the bad guys, right? What is their general vibe, right? Because they're gonna be bad guys, or like you said, right? Like, where does the magic come from? I think that's a big deal in fantasy worlds, and often it's just that, like, it exists, but clearly, like, there needs to be a little bit of, like, the science behind it, like the physics of the world needs to be, like, set. They don't need to be hard rules, but they need to be like, where does the cool abilities come from, and this is where they are, and it gives so much more context, right? For players when they're doing their thing, or even just, like, speaking from experience, for the GM to kind of rip off of in the moment.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so we have talked about a lot of the player-facing stuff, so I did want to touch on some of the things that the narrator of the game is working with.
Yes.
Kind of, I think the thing that stood out for me, I didn't go too deep into the section personally yet because I was looking at all the player stuff, but I did want to talk about antagonists and creating antagonists, because there is, like, mechanics unto themselves for that, if you wanted to talk about, like, how those work and what the inspirations for those might have been.
Yeah, so I wanted, a lot of Dawn, like I said, is, like, focused on the players and sort of letting you build up your wacky character with all your wacky options. But most of the time I feel that it is a bad idea to make that symmetrical for the GM, because it's intentional that I want all of a player's brain power to go into controlling their character. I want them to feel fully immersed. I want them to be thinking about what they can do all the time. But GMs control a lot of different characters. So most of the enemies in Dawn are very simple. You have one attack, you move one time, and you have one special move, and that's kind of it. But for GMs to like sort of get into that like power fantasy aspect a bit more, they can sort of elect specific NPCs in the world to be their antagonists. And antagonists have a bunch of like active abilities that the GM can spend resources on, and when they're an enemy, they have like more abilities in combat, and they have like special like reactive features that they can do outside of their turn, because normally enemies only do stuff on their turn. They don't react, they don't do anything, they just are kind of like obstacles for the players. And they generally just have a lot more agency, and most of the GM like stuff is based on that idea. Like, what do antagonists do? How do you power the antagonist? Like, there's a resource for it. How, like, what do the antagonists do in combat? I feel like that is most of the brunt of what GMs have to deal with in the system.
So is it like you would describe, wanting players to have the space to sort of create their own fun characters and create those stories with them? Is that what the antagonist then is for the narrator?
A little bit. It's a share of like, it's two things, really. It is, one, like the GM PZ kind of, as like the big villain, because antagonists, unlike regular enemies, are very massively customizable. You can get the regular enemy template, which is the most thing most enemies get like on its own, and you can also give them an antagonist edge, something that lets them take an advantage, get reactions, stuff like that. And you can give them modifiers, and you can combine NPC types, and you can really stack up this NPC into being something that's almost like a player character. They still don't work the same, but they have about as much complexity as like most, especially like early level player characters. So, as a GM, it lets you sort of make like a character for you to control instead of just having a bunch of minions. But it's also like a way for the GM to just say like, oh, this guy's important. Because all antagonists are named, you can make bonds with the antagonists, and they're just stronger by default. So even if you don't customize them and don't make them like a player character, you can have just multiple antagonists as a GM and be like, oh yeah, you've got to fight like this sort of minor antagonist that I'm not going to spend a lot of points on. I'm not going to like make it very good, but they're still an important named guy, they got a story, and they're going to fight you. And it's your way of being like sort of establishing an NPC above a player, because by default, players kind of dominate NPCs. They can like freely like go into like take them out in combat. There, it's very easy to deal with a normal NPC character in like the RP stuff, and that all kind of falls apart once you're against an antagonist, because antagonists have a lot more, like I said, agency in it, even if they're not like a fully customized, like sort of player adjacent type of character.
Yeah. So it's like less of, they are the roadblock that the players have to deal with. Like, they can't advance the story until whatever they're doing is dealt with.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so they function as like that ever-present threat, but then they, of course, they're gonna have more interesting, or I guess diverse mechanics than a typical NPC. Okay, so what about like just enemies in general then, or I guess more specifically, I kind of wanted to talk about like the combat mechanics, because it is like still the same sort of dice pool system, but they all have their own different, like, similar to the techniques, they all have their different abilities and things like that. I guess let's just get into combat, because that's sort of what I'm trying to drive towards, like the basics of it, I guess, how it works, and mostly why you chose specifically to have it on a 7x7 grid, which is a question that's been in the back of my mind since I kind of read this book.
Yeah, so combat, like you said, it's a grid-based system on a 7x7 grid, and it is classic sort of turn-based RPG combat. On everyone's turn, they get action points. For players, you get 3. For enemies, you get 2. And you get to use them on all of the various basic actions. I think the most important thing to go over in combat that isn't like the universal dice stuff is players, except for one very small exception, never get a new action ever. You don't get new spells, you don't get new like weapon attacks, you don't get new like anything. It is just the basic set of actions. There's a lot of them, like a lot of tactical RPGs, and they're very expansive, but that is always what you do. You will always be skirmishing, casting, moving, jumping, and doing all that stuff. The way that really gets diversified on the player end is with your techniques. Like if you have like Flameheart, it makes your cast to have different types of targeting. It lets you set people on fire when you do, it lets you blight them, lets you all that sort of stuff, and interact with the board more. And for enemies, they get their own unique set of stuff. The reason why it's always on a 7x7 board is because I want it to be... There's a few reasons for it. I think first of all, is I want it to very much be like arena combat. I don't think that like the environment and like working around like cover and like hiding behind stuff should really be that important. This is about your character interacting with the enemy in your way, and it's about like sort of expressing those parts of your character, and that is all done in the mix, get close together. So I kept the board very small. Like there's almost no range stuff, and the default range stuff is like basically just covers the whole board, so it's just whether or not you care about distance, really. And that is successful. But the other reason why it's specifically 7x7, like, because I could have picked any number and it's gone with the same goal. The reason why it's specifically 7x7 is because I wanted there to be a middle space to put stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, some techniques are like, you put something in the middle, and the middle is always the same, because it's always 7x7. And you don't need to worry about, like, oh, how big is the map for that to be good? Like, how fast am I? Like, the GM doesn't need to worry about, like, jockeying around the map to, like, make sure it works with your techniques. You're always going to have the same middle, no matter what. And it also makes, like, obstacles and, like, making like, one space of cover with your ability always the same impact, because it's always 7x7.
I see. Okay, that's pretty cool. That it kind of brings everything focused, right? Like it's less of like more like a slugfest where everyone's kind of throwing out their special techniques when things are flying all over the place, right? Versus you're some sort of insurgent or special ops group moving through a battlefield or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not meant to feel like you're doing a combat operation. It's meant to be a brawl, a fight, you know?
Yeah.
And the one, like, big exception to that I made is that there's a lot of abilities and stuff that take you off of the board. If you hide or, like, disappear with, like, magic or whatever, you don't exist on the board anymore. It's not like you're invisible on a space, you just leave. And you get to, like, reappear later because you got seen again. And one of the core mechanics that you can do in combat and out of combat is you can always duel someone, which is you take yourselves out of the scene and you're not even in combat anymore. You're in like a narrative scene where you get to like RP like a big fight between you. You get to use like your narrative skills and stuff and your ability and all that. And that can happen in combat, that can happen anywhere, and it means that people can have these sort of one-on-one isolated encounters even though you're on the really tiny map, because you can be off the map, you can take someone away, and you can like leave them to like do their brawl while you're like somewhere else doing something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting way of having the moments where everyone is fighting each other, then one person gets kicked off to the side, and then those two go at it while one person is taking on three other opponents. Like I said, it's focused, but also like you can zoom in to those individual fight scenes, which is like, again, anime as hell. I keep thinking about Jujutsu Kaisen jumpings in my head too when I'm thinking about that as well. That was pretty cool. You did a good job. Like,
thank you.
The more I think about it, the more I'm like, damn, this is so good. I wish I thought about that. That's a good idea. Maybe talk about the duels a little bit more, because that's like, again, like, it's a super interesting mechanic. So you're like in like the combat scenario, you're battling it out with your party, and then you finally get that asshole rival in the 1v1, and then like is that really what's going on? Like that was the whole choice. Like how did you come to that idea, I guess?
There's an aspect of combat I'll have to explain a bit more to get into duels first, I think. Especially duels if you're in like a narrative scene and you just like decide to fight a guy and you go into a duel because of it, it's a bit more simple. But going from combat to dueling, there's a bit more meat to it.
Okay.
In combat, there's a system called tension, which is a sort of resource that is accumulated by the scene. No one has like their own personal tension. There is just one tension number for the whole fight, and it starts at 0. Every round that goes by and every person that gets knocked out of the fight increases the tension by 1. And tension modifies most damage. So like enemies all get stronger when the tension goes up, and players their like finishing special moves get stronger. The regular attacks are the same, but their big special moves get a lot stronger. Which means that like as people fight and as people like get knocked out, everything gets more and more lethal. And dueling becomes it costs a lot of resources, but gets cheaper if the tension is high. Specifically, it costs like a special resource that is reduced by the tension to a minimum of 1. So that means like when things are getting really lethal and some people have been knocked out of the brawl, then all the players get to duel people for really, really cheap and start taking people out of the combat. And when that happens, you, like you said before, you like choose someone who's near you in the combat, and then you get to describe how you pull both of you off of the board. In like a game I did a while ago, we were in like a building. It was like a hotel or something, and the party got attacked. So we were like fighting in one of the rooms by like some people who were trying to like get us as like assassins or something. And my character, the way they did the duel was they grabbed one of the enemies and they jumped out of a window with them. So they just like left the board, they weren't there anymore. And while they did that, everyone else gets to fight for 1 round. Unless you're the only people left, your thing is sort of paused for a little. When you leave to duel, everyone else still gets to play in the combat and play in the brawl for a little bit until you or the person you're dueling start their next turn, or would start the next turn in the combat, and you get to finish it off. In which case you get to like describe your attack, they get to describe their defense, and then you roll one big roll against each other, and the winner wins the duel.
Okay, cool. So I mean, like you could coordinate a little bit with your other party members, being like, "I got this guy," and then you just like throw him into a room or something, and then the scene continues, and then you cut back to whatever is happening with you two. Then again, so if a duel doesn't go your way as a player, do you get booted back to the board, or are you just defeated?
It's not only for players, because whoever initiated the duel and spent the resources, if they lose, they get to either back off, which means they get the resources back and the duel just ends and they don't get a duel again, but they like escaped it somehow. They get to double down, which lets you retry, but if you lose, you can't fall back anymore. And finally, the take it, which is just take the whole consequence, take a bunch of like wounds, and possibly get knocked out of the combat if you already were wounded, and have like the person you took out return to the board.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that there's a mechanic for this thing that usually happens in a game, to be honest.
Yeah, it's because like so many like shonen stuff are based like mostly. I feel like it's weird for characters in shonen to actually get into multi-character fights. Like that's not really a thing that's supposed to happen. So I think like rightly for a lot of games, like a lot of other systems, just like don't do tactical combat, which is fair. But the problem is I love video games and I love tactical combat, and it's a part of the game I wanted to represent. So duels kind of let you have the story aspect of the one-on-one fights, while also being able to play in tactical combat and like express your character through those systems in a way that I think is just fun to play, even if it isn't like narratively what would sort of be the most obvious way if you wanted to do a total genre recreation.
Yeah, I'm willing. You can do a little bit of both, right? Like you still get to do I would say even a tighter tactical play, because like the map's so small. Like what are you gonna? You only have.
Oh yeah.
You gotta get in the right position, or else you can also just decide again. Like I think you've said it so well, when the tension's high, when both sides are losing. Well, more like the NPCs are getting downed, and the bad guys like, oh man, shit's getting real. Everyone's throwing off their super attacks. You just grab a dude and it's like, we're gonna finish this 1v1 me right now, right? Like it's pretty cool. I mean, I know for a fact that I would definitely always 1v1 people if I was the GM. Like my bad guy would constantly show up, grab one dude, and he's like, you're my guy. I'm gonna fight every single time. Like, so you better get good, kid.
Like what would happen if is anyone able to interrupt that duel, that one-on-one? Or is it just like those two are like out of the combat space, so no one else can interrupt? Like for that purpose, out of the space. You
can't interact with someone who did the duel. There is like implicitly, like there's nothing stopping a player from like if you and your buddy both duel someone on your turns, you could be in like the same space, like narratively doing your own thing and like helping each other out, because you're in like a narrative scene now. You're not really like following the combat rules. But if you aren't dueling and you're not in the narrative thing, you're in the combat board, you're in the brawl. You can't really interact with them.
Yeah, makes sense then. Because I was just curious if like, I don't know, someone would just come and get involved in a duel for whatever reason. But yeah, no, I like that it's these two characters, they're locked in their own combat. It's off to the side. It's just this particular scene that's happening elsewhere that the camera, I guess, occasionally focuses on.
Yeah. See, scenes through their name essentially kind of do that implicit, like, saying that there is a camera in it, which is, I know something that like not all tables do, but I definitely run RPGs as like television, like you saying what like the camera is on and like what characters are being shown at the moment, and that definitely exemplifies that aspect.
Okay. Yeah, so I did cover the specific things I wanted to get into. Ramon, I wasn't sure if there was something else that you wanted to touch on with the game.
I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty good. But yeah. How long did this take you to put together? Because it feels pretty cohesive.
A while. Like, I think the first game I released, like I said before, I think I just hit 3 years ago on that, was Star and City, and well, like just when I finished that, or like sometime in the middle maybe, I started working on this version of Dawn. I worked on Avant Dawn before that, but that's like, nothing really carries over except for thematically, they're both like sort of inspired by the same things. So Dawn as it is now, I think started about 3 years ago, or like 2.5 years ago. And I've kind of been working on it constantly since then, kind of like taking breaks to work on other projects, but it's always been sort of the core of what I was doing.
Yeah, because I was checking out those playlists you had made, and I think some of them were from around that time.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
I also probably should mention those music playlists, because I think that is very fun. Just like to have a specific playlist for the game to set that mood.
I saw another game do it a very long time ago, and I love the idea so much. I think I want to redo them when the game goes to print, because that's something I want to do. We funded it on Kickstarter, I think, and I'm in the process of getting that done, but who's saying how long it's going to take. But once that final version comes out, and I can't really update it anymore, because obviously it's going to be hard to like update a game that people have on paper. I want to, I think, redo the playlists with a playlist for all of the worlds instead of just like the vibes, which works, but I think the worlds one will be more useful for people.
Yeah, like just
for sure.
In the background as you're like building the game, or if you're a player working on your character, or if you're just reading through the book. I don't know. That was a fun idea. People should do more of that specific thing.
I agree. I love them so much. I love playlists for games.
I did have a thought actually that might be the last thing for now, because we did talk at the top of just having, the unstructured and structured systems as different things. There are some shared mechanics between them, but very little like shared resources and numbers.
Yes.
I was wondering, like, given that this is a setting agnostic, do you think this could work as like two separate entities? Like if someone wanted to take, say, the narrative system from this game and then stick it onto the combat system of a different game, do you think that could work if they're in similar enough genre, or similar enough tropes? Mostly.
There's a bit of overlap there, but I think you could. I think it would be much easier to play Dawn as like just its narrative systems and like not use the combat, or like use the combat of a different system, because I think that's more isolated. Combat has a bit of like, I think the only issue was really like you couldn't do dueling, and I like dueling a lot. Because the whole point, I think you could do it, because you just have dueling be like, oh, I'm going to the other system of whatever RP you're doing, and I think that would work very well. I think you could do that, especially since the game is built to be played in at least 3 different worlds. A lot of the features aren't like setting specific and work for a lot of different settings, and I think the game's pretty transparent about what it does and doesn't work with. So I think you could like homebrew that shit up and do like something a bit more weird with it, and it would like work out pretty well.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, like, you share like 4 numbers and a pool of resources, and that's kind of like the main thing that's shared between the two. So I don't know, that could be adapted into another thing, but I don't know, they do work well together so far from what I've read of the game. And, you know, knowing that there's going to be more updates and stuff in the future. All right, well, if people do want to keep track of those updates, where can they find you? I'm guessing your Discord would be the best spot to do that, because it seems like there's playtesting and stuff going on in there.
Yeah, Discord will give you everything. I post links to like all the socials when I post like announcements and stuff, and there's people talking about it. Discord number 1. Number 2, I would say, is my Patreon. My Patreon I do updates weekly, and it has some stuff for free, but if you're sub to Patreon, you have access to a free download for all of my games, and it lets you like see a bunch of like work in progress stuff that I'm not like ready to share to the public. But if you just want to get what's there for the public, you can follow me on Tumblr or on Blue Sky, and that's where I share all of my like free posts and where I put all of my like full updates for games and stuff. Any of those platforms work, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to share those below. You also have like a not a link tree, but you had something else that had like all your links as well, I believe.
Yes, page, I think it's called. I got the link on my card, not page.
Yeah. We will have the card link as well. Is there anything else you want to cover before we roll into the proper outro of the episode? We had before the episode, we had considered talking about Heaven Hell as well, but I feel like maybe we can save that for its own full episode.
Yeah, I feel like we talked a lot here.
Yeah, anything else for Dawn before we roll into the outro?
I guess just stay tuned. I'm waiting on a lot of different things from different people, but if those things come around, I'll have a lot of fun updates for people who like Dawn soon. So yeah, follow those socials if you're interested. Join the Discord if you want to talk to people. If not, just follow the stuff where I only tell you, you don't gotta interact. And yeah, have a great night or day whenever you're listening to this.
Whatever time. I think people listen to us a lot on like Thursdays-ish in the late afternoon, which is weird, but if that's when you're around, have a great that
have
day.
Have a good night on Thursday.
Yeah, again, we will have the link to the itch.io page for Dawn below, as well as a link to Joel's Patreon and the card link if you want to check out everything else. For things on our end, if you want to hear more about from the Win With Dice podcast, where we have more interviews with game designers, we talk about different game systems like Lancer and Pathfinder and Mutants and Masterminds and Starfinder and Kane we've covered a few times. Go ahead and check out our previous episodes on YouTube or on Spotify, wherever else you may get your podcasts from. We're on a bunch of different platforms. Some of them I know for sure I didn't sign up for, so you'll probably find us somewhere. In addition, I also want to shout out some other people who are linked below on the YouTube page, especially if you are into the Lancer RPG. There's a bunch of people, a bunch of different writers and creators we've talked to, so go ahead and check out all their work, as well as some other channels linked down there, like Vault Companions, who recently started a new actual play series, and the Untold Stories Project, which is wrapping up their Mutants and Masterminds Freedom League Dark campaign in the next couple of weeks, which I'm going to be very emotional about, because that was like the last 1 or 2 years of Wednesdays for me. I think that's about it. Ramon, did you want to mention Project Versus as well?
Yeah. So I'm working on 2 things. Project Versus, my fighting game inspired TTRPG. That should be up on our website. I do owe you guys like the next release. I've been working on another game. My attention has been spread thin. But yeah, Mechanized Bodies with Trey and HP Shaka. If you know his work for the Lancer stuff. But yeah, we have a Discord for that game, and it's a mechanized sci-fi card-based TTRPG. Lots of fun, lots of cool cards, and lots of cool mechs and sci-fi stuff. So please check it out. Please join our Discord. We're running playtests all the time, and it's like super fun. So yeah.
Cool. So Joel, we should have everything linked up so people can go ahead and check all of that out. Is there anything else you want to say before we end the episode, or just a cool goodbye? Either one.
Just that I hope everyone has a good night. Yeah, play games, think about games, make games, enjoy games.
For sure. I think a lot of people out there they don't know they have a game in them until they let it out. So hopefully,
that's the thing I want to say. Finish games. Don't work on the same game for 3 years with your same project. Make a bad game so you make a good one later.
Yes.
The truth. For sure.
That is very true. I think that's the most important advice that's ever been on this show. Finish games.
Finish games.
Alright, well, for all of our GMs and players out there, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.